I want to talk to you about the concept of binge writing. I've interviewed Michael Lewis and Stephen King, and they talk about spending specific time every day writing. And when you started talking about binge writing, it spoke to me, and I think a lot of other people.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how that works for you and why it works for you.
Well, binge writing is just like it sounds. You write for long periods of time, but not necessarily on a regular schedule. And that's just worked better for me in so many ways. Certainly as a mother, because I do have two kids who are 11 and 13. And, any parent knows that the kid's schedule comes first. And so I don't have the life over these last, 13 years where I could say, no, every day I'm writing for this many hours, and no matter what happens, that's what I'm going to be doing. I just don't have that luxury. But it's even deeper than that. Before I became a mother, I tried to do that sort of thing. I'd been told so many times that a real writer writes every day. I mean, that's something you hear really often. And I always felt at odds with that because my creative flow works in a slightly different way. I am far more creative in a sort of immersive way where I go all the way in, really deep. And once I'm there, I don't want to leave. I want to stay in there. And so, that might be a day, it might be a week. Before I had kids, it might be a month. That I would really be, sort of like a dog with a bone on that project. And then I would be done with it. And I wouldn't feel the need to write for a little while. And that didn't mean I wasn't a writer. It just meant my creativity worked differently. And so it was really liberating for me to just say, hey, this is the way I do it. I think it's great that Stephen King writes whatever by his schedule. I think that as in writing and as in so many things in life, there is no one way to do it right. As long as it works for you, you're doing it right.
When do you feel that sense of flow people talk about? When you feel like the conductor of some kind of internal orchestra that's really working for you. Is it as soon as you sit down, as soon as you close that door and have silence, or as soon as that next sentence pops in, or do you have to be a few pages in?
Oh my goodness, it's never as soon as I sit down. In fact, as soon as I sit down, I often think, why am I doing this? I can't do this. I'm not going to succeed. This is hard. Maybe the floor needs to be, mopped instead, right? I mean, I think part of my process is that anxiety, that resistance, and that desire to escape into almost anything else. But what I've learned is that you just have to stick with it. You have to keep faith with your work and to say, I'm going to push through that anxiety and resistance. And when I do that, I will reach that flow. And I will reach that time in the making of the story or the essay or the book where I don't want to do anything else. That like you realize the sun's going down and you haven't eaten for 10 hours and you're like, wait a minute, I don't want to stop. I don't even want to stop for the basic necessities of living, right? And that's a beautiful place to reach. But it takes work to get there. It's not something that I can just turn on because I want to.
You, for a portion of your life, you were a journalist,
mm-hmm.
and I've been a journalist for 30 years, and it's an interesting place to be in that you're inhabiting other people's experiences over and over and over again and writing about them. How was it with you when you inhabited your own experience? I mean, is that what you felt like when you said that second heart that was beating inside you that you needed to get out? Or do you think you would have stayed in journalism?
No, I don't think. Obviously, and even still I write journalism every once in a while, but it's not really my calling. And, I think that among all of the writers I know, journalists and creative writers included, there is that sense of like, what are the kinds of stories that you are here to tell? What is the thing that drives you? It's like at your very core, what is the kind of story you want to tell? And for whatever reason, many of those stories for me do come from that very personal place. It's not about being so focused on necessarily me and my life, but it's rather using me and my life to tell that bigger human story. And I think that journalists just do the kind of opposite of that with the same goal in mind. We all want to tell that human story. We just have different ways of getting there. My husband is a documentary filmmaker, which is essentially a kind of journalist, and he tells other people's stories. But he does it in a way that I know that there's some core truth that's always about him. And I try to use my story to tell a core truth that's true about you.
I know you teach writing as well, and one of the interesting things I heard from you in a podcast was your discussion of Talisman and the importance of Talisman in writing. Talk to me a little bit about how you use that with your students and how you use it in your own writing.
I think that so much of writing is about noticing, paying attention, and using the world around us to tell the story of our character, or if we're writing about ourselves, ourselves. And one of the greatest tools is to pay attention to the physical world, and especially the physical that we attach literally to our bodies. We're both wearing wedding rings. That's a cultural talisman. Without talking to you, you and I know something about each other that we have in common, and it's only through a physical object. If you and I hadn't said a word to each other and we saw each other across the room, we would observe that about each other. And then there are personal talismans. There are things, only I know what this ring on this finger means to me, but it's a story. I could tell you the story about it, and I know that if I asked you to do the same, I bet there would be something. There would be a story attached to something you're wearing. And what I love about that as a writer is it's just another avenue. It's another way to make the world vivid to the reader, to tell us something true about the character or the life or the experience, that we're trying to create vividly on the page.
When you get in front of a group of eager writers, people who you're trying to inspire or that are looking for inspiration from you, what do you tell them besides write like a mother? Which I love, by the way.
I tell them a lot of things. That's just the only one that can go on a sort of coffee mug or a bumper sticker. What do I tell them? That's such a long. There's such a long answer to that question, but one thing I want to say that's really, I think, important, or a key component of my teaching, is that I don't try to inspire people. When I was writing all of my books, people say to me, "I'm so inspired," especially Wild. It's so inspirational, and I didn't set out to inspire people. I set out to tell the truth, and as a writer, and I mean that you can tell the truth in fiction too. I mean, again, that truth of what does it mean to be human, and I think that when I'm teaching, I also try to do that. I try to help people be brave enough to go to those deepest places. And if they end up feeling inspired by that message or that encouragement, like I'm glad of it, I'll take it. But I don't set out to try to do that. And I think what's interesting about that is people are inspired by being given permission, essentially, to be courageous in ways that often we're told not to be. We're told, don't write about your flaws, actually show the perfect face. Don't write about the mistakes you made. Don't write about the times when you felt ambivalent, when you really should have been sure, or all of those things we tend to keep in the back. Writing is about welcoming them forward, and I think people end up feeling inspired by that liberation.
One thing I ask all the guests is, with how ubiquitous social media is, it is in some ways stealing people's focus and their deep work. What do you do in your own life to put that in its place, and how do you teach your children to put that in its place so you can achieve that deep focused work?
It's so hard. I'm still trying to answer that question for myself as a person and as a mother. Because absolutely, I've seen that with my kids. They are preteens now. They've just recently, in the last year or so, gotten their own iPhones, and I see the number of books they read goes down because it's they spend more time reading that screen, looking at, doing whatever we all do on the screens, and I see that in my own life too. And I think it's as with anything, that we need to be conscious and moderate, and every day make that choice. What is it that I want to do with this hour? Maybe it's spend that whole hour on social media. I don't think that's inherently bad, but if you're doing that every hour, there's something wrong. And I've had to bring that in my own life into consciousness, to just be more awake to what I'm choosing to do and why.
Finally, what are you working on now? What are you thinking about, writing about, mulling about, writing about?
I'm writing another book. I'm writing a memoir, and I really always hate talking about, the book I'm writing, because it always sounds silly and stupid, and then like whatever I say it's about, it won't be, in the book or something in the final cut. But I will say, it's about me, which but it's really a deep exploration of some of the questions that I've been grappling with in my adult life. In answering that question, how do I make a home in the world? I'm somebody who lost my home and lost my family at essentially the moment I became an adult, at that crossroads. And I'm 48 now, and I've made a home in the world. I've made a new, family and a new life. And so it's a lot of, I'm exploring those journeys and those questions in the book.
Oh, I look forward to reading it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
It was wonderful talking to you.